A black family's peaceful picnic turns into chaos when a wealthy racist woman hurls insults, then calls 911 with a deadly lie, claiming the family is an armed gang. Within minutes, SWAT descends, forcing the father to his knees in front of his terrified wife and 8-year-old daughter. Once police realize the truth and release them, Karen smugly drives away. But the father, an unshaken history teacher, vows justice. His investigation exposes her as head of a fraudulent children's charity, funneling millions to her brother. With an investigative reporter, he times the reveal perfectly. During Karen's gala, her crimes break live on the news. She's arrested on stage, humiliated before the entire city. And from that downfall, the father launches a new transparent charity, turning Karen's hate into a movement for real good. If you are enjoying the stories, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. And now, let us begin the complete story. A crisp autumn breeze rustled through the leaves, casting a cool shadow over the sprawling black family's picnic in the park. The sun was setting behind the rolling hills, casting long shadows on the soft grass and the families who had gathered under their shade. The sound of children laughing, shouting, and playing filled the air as they enjoyed each other's company, unaware that this peaceful moment would soon turn into a nightmare. As the family sat down to enjoy their meal, Sarah, Karen, and her 9-year-old daughter, Amelia, noticed something strange in the way Mrs. Wilson, the wealthy racist woman who had been making comments earlier, was speaking with her brother on the phone. The conversation took place over speakers while Mr. Wilson held a megaphone at arm's length, his voice booming with rage and conviction. Sarah couldn't shake off the feeling that she knew something was amiss. She leaned in closer to hear Mrs. Wilson's words more clearly, but as her husband turned back around, the woman abruptly hung up the phone and faced them with a smug smile on her face. Mrs. Wilson's sudden change of demeanor set off an immediate alarm among the family members. As Karen tried to process what had just happened, Amelia looked at Sarah in confusion, asking, "Mommy, why is she talking to our brother like that? It doesn't sound good." Sarah knew exactly how Mrs. Wilson was feeling. She'd been investigating her husband's past and uncovering a dark secret about his family's history of racism and inequality for months now. The truth had finally come out, and the man they loved most couldn't hide it any longer. As Karen glared at her brother, who remained silent with only a furrowed brow as he listened to Mrs. Wilson's tirade, she could feel her anger building within her. She knew that if she didn't act fast, Mr. Wilson would expose their family's darkest secrets and put them in the public eye. "Son," Karen said through clenched teeth, "I have something you need to hear." With a sudden burst of determination, Sarah gathered all of her courage and walked over to Mrs. Wilson, standing inches away from the man who had just shattered her world. Mrs. Wilson looked up at her with piercing eyes, her voice barely above a whisper as she spoke. "Karen," she said softly, "I'm sorry for what I did earlier today, but this is more than an isolated incident." Sarah's heart sank as Mrs. Wilson explained the details of how she had been investigating Mr. Wilson and discovered that he was involved in multiple cases where his family members were accused of racial profiling and discrimination. "I understand now," Karen replied, her voice shaking with anger, but also determination to stand up for what is right. "And I know what you're going through as well." Mrs. Wilson's eyes narrowed as she glared at the father before finally speaking in a low, barely audible voice. "You have every right to be angry and frustrated," she said, her voice growing louder with each word. "But please understand that this is not your fault. You've always been loyal and fair, but we all make mistakes from time to time." Karen's heart sank as Mrs. Wilson continued to speak, and Sarah could see the anger building within her husband. She knew that if Mr. Wilson found out about what she had discovered, he would never forgive his family. Suddenly, Karen took a deep breath and stepped back, placing her hands on top of Mr. Wilson's shoulder in a gesture of support. "I understand your pain," she said softly. "But please, KN, now that I am here for you if you ever need someone to talk to or someone to help carry the weight of this secret." Mr. Wilson looked up at Karen with surprise, his eyes filled with disbelief and hurt. He shook his head in frustration before reluctantly turning away from her. As he walked back towards their picnic table, Mrs. Wilson's words stayed with him throughout the rest of the evening, reminding him that they had a long journey ahead to heal and move forward together as a family. But for now, Karen knew she would do whatever it took to protect those she loved most and ensure that justice was served. The scene ends there, leaving the audience on the edge of their seats wondering what will happen next in the story. As they wait for the next chapter, they are left with a sense of hope as well as a heavy heart, knowing that no matter how difficult things may seem now, the family's journey towards redemption and understanding continues to unfold. Hour start. As the sun began to set on Mrs. Wilson's peaceful picnic, a wealthy racist woman named Sarah walked through the park, her eyes fixed on the lush green landscape and the rows of colorful flowers that surrounded them. She had come here with a group of friends for an afternoon of relaxation and escape from the hustle and bustle of their lives. But as they enjoyed their food and drinks under the trees, she couldn't help feeling uneasy. Sarah was known throughout the community for her wealthy lifestyle, always owning expensive cars, designer clothing, and a private jet that made getting around easy. As she passed by Mr. Wilson's family sitting on the picnic table next to Karen and Jack, Sarah noticed how happy they were together, sharing stories of their days spent with each other in happier times. Suddenly, without warning, Sarah launched into an offensive tirade at Mrs. Wilson, calling her a racist mother for daring them to enjoy peace during their vacation on the park. She accused Karen and Jack of being part of an armed gang that had been terrorizing the community and claimed they were hiding in plain sight. Sarah's words caused a commotion, with several people from around the picnic table running towards her. Mr. Wilson stood up, his voice shaking as he tried to defuse the situation by explaining how everything was just a misunderstanding. He told Sarah that he and Karen had been friends for years, but their relationship had recently taken a dark turn when they found out about each other's past. Sarah listened attentively, her eyes narrowing with anger and disbelief at Mr. Wilson's explanation. She accused him of lying to them and called him a traitor who was hiding something from the community. As she spoke, Sarah's friends began to gather around her, their faces. "I know this is all just an excuse for your behavior," Karen said through clenched teeth. "We don't know why you would do it now, especially after everything we've been going through lately." Mr. Wilson took a deep breath and tried to regain control of the situation. He explained that Sarah had threatened their family's safety by accusing them of being part of an armed gang, even though they had never been involved in any illegal activities. Sarah refused to listen, her anger boiling over as she accused Mr. Wilson of trying to cover up for his own actions and silence his wife, who was struggling with mental health issues. She claimed that he needed help dealing with the stress of their financial situation and the constant scrutiny from Sarah's friends. As the argument escalated between them, Karen began to feel overwhelmed by the tension in the air. She knew they had a long journey ahead of them if they wanted to move past this misunderstanding and heal as a family. They could try to talk it out with Mr. Wilson himself, but she was afraid that he might not be able to hear her or understand what she was saying. Just then, Karen's phone rang, signaling the arrival of their neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, who had been called by Sarah. She walked over to them and listened intently as Sarah threatened her own life if they didn't apologize for the way they treated their family. Mrs. Jenkins calmly explained that Sarah wasn't being a threat at all but rather expressing how she felt about Mr. Wilson's actions and the impact it was having on their community. She told Mrs. Wilson of the recent events in the park, including the racist attack against Karen, and offered to help them come together and find a solution. Mrs. Jenkins suggested that they talk to Karen's therapist to get an outside perspective on her emotions and to understand what is causing Sarah to feel so angry towards Mr. Wilson. She also proposed organizing a community event where everyone could come together and discuss their concerns in a safe and respectful environment, allowing them to share their perspectives without fear of judgment. Sarah was taken aback by Mrs. Jenkins' offer, but ultimately agreed to meet with Karen's therapist the next day. As they sat down at her office, Sarah couldn't help feeling relieved that she had found someone who could understand her pain and provide a helping hand. The following days were filled with conversations between Mr. Wilson, Mrs. Jenkins, and Karen about how they could work together to overcome their misunderstandings and heal as a family. They talked about the importance of empathy, understanding, and forgiveness in overcoming difficult situations like this, and Sarah began to see that Mr. Wilson was willing to listen when she shared her story with him. As they worked through these conversations, Karen gradually started to understand why Sarah had acted out in such a hostile manner towards their family. She realized that the stress of trying to make ends meet during difficult times had caused her to become more consumed by anger and resentment than ever before. However, Mrs. Jenkins' approach helped her see that there was still hope for them to move forward as a unit and rebuild their lives together. Eventually, they decided to set aside all personal differences and focus on the bigger picture. They organized an event at a local community center where everyone could come together and learn about mental health issues and how to support those who are struggling with similar challenges. The day was packed with workshops, group therapy sessions, and presentations by experts in the field. As they sat around the table, surrounded by people from all walks of life, Mrs. Jenkins reminded them that their families were not alone in this battle against racism and discrimination. She encouraged them to take action towards creating a more inclusive and welcoming community for everyone, regardless of their background or beliefs. The event was a huge success, with thousands of people attending the day's activities. It brought together people from different backgrounds, ages, races, and walks of life, sharing stories of their own experiences and struggles in a safe and supportive environment. The atmosphere was one of hope, optimism, and healing, as everyone felt like they had taken an important step towards creating a more just society. As the sun began to set on the day's festivities, Mr. Wilson, Karen, Mrs. Jenkins, and Jack stood together at the center of the community event, holding hands in solidarity for their family and the wider community. They knew that this was only the beginning of their journey towards healing and redemption as a family, but they were determined to fight against racism and discrimination with all their might. As the final words from Mrs. Jenkins rang out over the crowd, she encouraged them to continue working together to create lasting change in their lives and communities. She reminded them that no matter how difficult things may seem now or what challenges lie ahead, they had a chance to build a brighter future for themselves and generations to come. The event was an overwhelming success, bringing hope, healing, and unity to the community of Parkside. As they walked away from the venue, Mr. Wilson, Karen, Mrs. Jenkins, and Jack knew that their journey towards redemption and understanding as a family had just begun, but they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead with renewed determination and resilience. The sun continued setting over the park, casting long shadows across the rows of colorful flowers and casting a warm glow on the families gathered around them. As they made their way back to their cars, Karen couldn't help feeling grateful for Mrs. Jenkins' intervention and the lessons she had taught her about empathy, understanding, and forgiveness. She knew that the road ahead would be difficult but also rewarding, one filled with moments of hope, healing, and growth as a family. She looked forward to continuing this journey together towards creating a more just society, where everyone was valued, respected, and treated with dignity and compassion no matter their background or beliefs. Int. Parkside suburb. Day the sun rises over the peaceful park, casting a warm glow on the families gathered around them for their picnic. Karen and Jack stand at the entrance of the field, watching as Mr. Wilson leads his family in a traditional African-American ceremony to welcome nature's blessings. Karen and Jack are black, but they have grown up with mixed-race heritage and experienced different cultures firsthand. They share a close bond that runs deep, both emotionally and professionally, and their love for each other is evident on this day. As the sun rises, Mr. Wilson stands at the center of the circle, surrounded by his family members, including Karen, Mrs. Jenkins, and Jack. He addresses them with words of respect and gratitude, acknowledging the sacrifices that have been made to create a better future for their community. Mr. Wilson's voice echoes through the park as he declares that this picnic was not just about food or fun. It was an opportunity for families to come together, connect, and celebrate their diversity in the face of adversity. He explains how his family has faced discrimination and prejudice from others for generations, but they have always persevered with hope and determination. Karen nods silently as Mr. Wilson speaks, her heart filled with pride at witnessing this remarkable group of people coming together to make a positive change. She knows that their journey towards redemption is just beginning, but she can't help feeling grateful for Mrs. Jenkins' intervention and the lessons she has taught her about empathy, understanding, and forgiveness. Mrs. Jenkins, an African-American woman in her mid-60s with short curly hair and bright green eyes, stands next to Karen, smiling warmly at their son, Jack. She is a strong-willed advocate for racial justice and works tirelessly to bridge the gap between different communities. I've been watching this family's journey from afar, Mrs. Jenkins says softly. I saw how they faced challenges with grace and resilience, but I also noticed that there was an underlying sadness in their faces. That's when I decided to step in. Mrs. Jenkins' words resonate deeply with Karen, who nods silently as she realizes the gravity of her mother's actions. She had been following Mrs. Jenkins on social media for years, seeing how they were working tirelessly to promote racial equality and understanding. I wanted to help, Karen says, her voice filled with determination. I know that this picnic was just a small step forward, but it showed us the power of coming together in love and compassion. Mrs. Jenkins nods again, pleased by Karen's enthusiasm. She explains that she had been monitoring their social media accounts for weeks, following their events, volunteering at local organizations, and speaking out about racial injustice whenever she saw something that stood out. Through your work, Mrs. Jenkins says softly, you've shown us what it means to be a force for good in this world. Karen smiles, knowing exactly how much her mother's actions have impacted her and the community as a whole. She knows that their journey towards redemption is far from over, but she feels confident that they are well on their way. As Mr. Wilson leads his family through the park, Karen stands behind them, feeling proud of all that has been accomplished so far. They know that there will be obstacles and challenges along the way, but they also have a sense of hope that together they can overcome any obstacle and create a more just society for everyone. The sun continues to rise over the park as they make their way back to Mrs. Jenkins' house in Parkside suburb. Karen stops at her mother's front door, feeling grateful for the opportunity to be here with them today. Hey, she says softly, taking off her hat and placing it on the doorstep outside. How was your picnic? Mrs. Jenkins nods eagerly, smiling as she opens the door and greets Karen with a warm hug. I'm so glad you could join us. she says, holding her hand tightly. It means everything to me that we all came together today. Karen smiles back, feeling grateful for Mrs. Jenkins' unwavering support and guidance throughout their journey towards redemption. She knows that this picnic was just the beginning of a long road filled with challenges, but also with countless opportunities to make positive change in the world. As they hug tightly before leaving the house, Karen can't help but feel inspired by her mother's actions and the progress she has made in promoting racial equality. They walk away from Parkside suburb, their spirits lifted as they know that together they can create a brighter future for themselves and generations to come. In the peaceful Parkside suburb, Karen and her mother, Mrs. Jenkins, sat down for a relaxing picnic under an old oak tree as they enjoyed their favorite meal of grilled burgers and fresh fruit. As the sun began to set, Karen couldn't help but feel grateful for this chance to spend quality time with her loved ones while also reflecting on recent events that had left her shaken. As she pulled out her camera to capture a picture of their surroundings, Mrs. Jenkins spoke up. "Karen, I wanted to show you something." She motioned towards the nearby bushes and explained that one day, when they were picking wildflowers in the park, Karen accidentally stepped upon a hidden nest containing 2 injured raccoons. The mother had taken them under her wing and was doing everything she could to care for them. Karen couldn't believe what she saw as Mrs. Jenkins carefully tended to each of the animals' wounds, gently cleaning their fur with warm water from her hand. She watched in awe as they curled up on a nearby rock, contentedly snuggling together while Karen continued snapping photos. As the mother finished caring for the raccoons, she turned and looked at Karen expectantly. "Karen," Mrs. Jenkins said, "I know we didn't mean to harm them, but it's important that you see this side of ourselves as well." She smiled encouragingly, placing her hand on Karen's shoulder before continuing. "Racism is not a natural part of the human race. It's an inherent flaw that has been ingrained in our society for far too long. We need to learn from the past and work towards creating a more inclusive future." Karen nodded thoughtfully, feeling inspired by Mrs. Jenkins' words as she watched her mother continue talking about the importance of recognizing and addressing systemic racism. She knew that it was not enough just to talk about change. Action needed to be taken in order for progress to truly happen. As they packed up their picnic lunch and headed back home, Karen couldn't help but feel a sense of determination within her chest. She knew that she had the power to make a difference, no matter how small it may seem. And so, with Mrs. Jenkins' guidance as inspiration, Karen set out on a journey towards becoming an advocate for racial justice. Over the next few weeks and months, Karen began volunteering at local community centers where she worked with young people from marginalized backgrounds, helping them learn about their rights and fighting against discrimination. She participated in workshops and events that emphasized the importance of intersectionality and the role that individuals can play in creating a more equitable world for all. As her visibility grew, Karen received numerous calls from concerned citizens who wanted to know how they could help support these efforts. Some suggested starting small by attending local rallies or speaking out at community meetings. Others offered their own resources or services to help with fundraising and advocacy work. Karen was touched by the people's passion for change and felt grateful that her actions were making a difference in their lives. However, as she continued on this journey, Karen encountered numerous obstacles along the way. Some of them came from personal setbacks or discrimination within her own community, while others posed more serious challenges related to systemic racism at larger scales. She found herself struggling with feelings of frustration and self-doubt, questioning whether it was truly possible for a person like her to make a real impact in such an entrenched system. But Karen refused to give up on her goal. With each rejection or setback, she reminded herself that the world needed someone brave enough to stand up for what is right. She knew that change would not happen overnight, but every step forward was progress towards creating a more just and equitable society. Through it all, Mrs. Jenkins remained by Karen's side, providing unwavering support and encouragement as she faced each challenge head-on. They talked about the power of perseverance, how sometimes the most difficult parts of change are those that require us to keep moving even when we don't feel like it. And with her guidance, Karen found strength in knowing that together they could overcome any obstacle and make a difference. As the sun began to set on Parkside suburb once again, Karen knew that she had taken an important step towards becoming a true ally for racial justice. She hugged Mrs. Jenkins tightly before leaving their home, feeling grateful for her mother's unwavering belief in her ability to create change and inspiring others along the way. As they walked through the park, Karen couldn't help but feel renewed by the memories of that peaceful picnic where she had first witnessed racism on a personal level. But more importantly, she knew that it was not just about individual acts of kindness. It was also about collective action towards creating a society in which every voice is heard and everyone's rights are protected. With this new understanding firmly planted within her heart, Karen continued to walk forward, confident in the knowledge that with time, hard work, and dedication, she could make a real difference in the world. And as she looked out at the vast expanse of greenery around her, she knew that the journey ahead was not yet over, but one where hope and progress were always within reach. Int. Black Families Park. Day Karen, a middle-aged woman with soft Sophia Baker hair and piercing blue eyes, stands at the edge of their picnic blanket, looking out over the lush green fields stretching as far as she could see. The sun is high in the sky, casting golden light on the trees that line the perimeter of the park, giving it an almost serene atmosphere. Karen's heart beats fast with anticipation as she watches her family, Maggie, a mother, Timmy, their middle-aged son, and their daughter, Lily, gather around them, laughing and chatting about their plans for the day. Suddenly, Mrs. Jenkins steps forward from the group, her voice shaking slightly. "Karen," she says, taking Karen's hand, "I have to tell you something that I believe is important." Karen looks at her mother with a mix of surprise and concern as Mrs. Jenkins pulls out an old photo album from her purse. "Look at this picture," Mrs. Jenkins says, holding up the faded image of their family picnicking in the park earlier that day. "It's from our childhood. I had never seen it before." Karen hesitates for a moment, then nods slowly as she scans through the pages. The photo shows her and Timmy sitting on the blanket next to Lily, laughing and playing with each other. As Karen examines the image more closely, she notices that there is something strange about it. In one hand, Timmy holds what looks like a gun, while in the other, he has placed an injured bird in his lap. The photo was taken moments before Mrs. Jenkins had called 911 to report a deadly lie. Karen gasps and turns back to her family. Timmy's face twists into a terrified expression as he whispers, "Mom," he says, running towards the photo with his hand covering his mouth. "This is what we did." Karen looks at Mrs. Jenkins in disbelief, then studies the bird on Timmy's lap closely. The bird has been shot, and its feathers are torn apart by a sharp arrow. Karen realizes that it was not just an ordinary toy. It was likely a live animal. "What do you mean, Mom?" Lily asks, her eyes wide with fear. Mrs. Jenkins shakes her head. "We were playing hide-and-seek when Timmy stumbled upon this injured bird," she explains. "He thought we could use the gun to scare it away or make it fly away on its own. But no matter how hard he tried, it wouldn't budge." Karen's heart drops as she thinks about what her family had done. She knew that they were wrong and that their actions were not only cruel, but also illegal. "We must have been so focused on playing, we didn't see the consequences," Karen says. tears streaming down her face. Maggie nods in agreement, understanding the gravity of her mistake. I was just trying to show Timmy how brave he could be and that even animals can fight back. She adds with a small smile before turning towards Lily. Lily looks at their mother with confusion, then turns her eyes back onto Karen. "What's going on?" she asks, looking around the park as if trying to find answers. Mrs. Jenkins shakes her head. "I don't know," she says, taking a deep breath. "But I'm so sorry for what we did. We didn't mean to harm an innocent bird, and that was never our intention." Karen nods slowly, feeling grateful for Mrs. Jenkins' honesty and understanding. As they gather their things and pack up the picnic blanket, Karen knows that her journey towards becoming a true ally for racial justice has just begun. She will continue to learn from this experience and use it as an inspiration to guide her actions going forward. But more than anything else, she understands now how important it is to listen actively to others' stories, understand their perspectives, and work together towards creating a world where everyone's rights are respected and protected. And with that thought in mind, Karen turns around and walks away from the park, determined to make a difference in her community and beyond. The sun continues to shine down on them as they continue their journey towards justice and equality for all. Global outline. A black family's peaceful picnic turns into chaos when a wealthy racist woman hurls insults, then calls 911 with a deadly lie, claiming the family is an armed gang. The day began as a simple and enjoyable gathering of friends and family at Mrs. Jenkins' backyard for their annual summer barbecue. As they enjoyed delicious food, laughter, and good company, Karen, her husband Mike, their 2 children, and 3 grandchildren made plans to leave early in the afternoon to explore nearby nature trails. As they strolled through a lush forest, the group noticed an unfamiliar bird perched on a branch of a tree. The family was curious but not afraid, as the bird seemed harmless enough. Karen approached it gently with her hand outstretched and asked if anyone could identify its species or markings. The bird quickly responded by chirping in a distinctive melody that echoed through the forest. Mrs. Jenkins, who had grown up on an agricultural farm, recognized the sound easily. She remembered hearing similar melodies from a local flock of geese at a nearby pond years ago. Excitedly, Karen reached out to touch the bird, feeling its feathers soft and warm. "Hey there," she said as she gently grasped onto the bird's neck. "Is this your family's pet?" The bird flew away quickly, but Karen couldn't shake off the image of it perched on her arm or watching her from afar. She knew that a blackbird was not an innocent creature and must have been affected by their actions. As they continued along the forest path, Mrs. Jenkins noticed something strange in one particular tree, a small cache of firearms hidden deep within its branches. Her heart raced as she realized what could have happened next. The wealthy racist woman had stumbled upon this precious stash while clearing up the backyard for her annual barbecue and discovered that it belonged to Karen's family. Mrs. Jenkins immediately called 911, claiming that they were witnessing an armed gang activity in their neighborhood. As police arrived on scene, Karen and Mike rushed outside, grateful for their safety but also anxious about what had happened next. The racist woman was heard by the authorities, describing a group of young men with black flags adorned around their necks. The family's peaceful picnic turned into chaos as they were arrested and accused of belonging to an illegal gang. The wealthy racist woman claimed that Karen and Mike were part of a radical black nationalist organization fighting for racial justice and freedom in her community. As the police conducted interviews, Karen felt overwhelmed by the injustice she was witnessing firsthand. She had always been passionate about racial equality, but never expected it to involve violence or criminality. As she listened to Mrs. Jenkins' account of what happened that day, a sense of empathy washed over her. I'm so sorry for your family's ordeal, Karen said as tears streamed down her face. We didn't mean to harm an innocent bird, and we're just trying to make sure our community is safe. Mrs. Jenkins looked at her with disappointment, but also understanding. She knew that the racist woman was not entirely wrong, but she had chosen a misguided path in order to raise awareness about racial inequality. I understand your concerns, Mrs. Jenkins said, but there are systemic issues that need addressing before we can truly create a world where everyone's rights are respected and protected. Karen nodded eagerly as they discussed their plans to engage the community on these matters, including organizing rallies, speaking at local schools, and advocating for policy changes. As the day drew to an end, Karen couldn't shake off the feeling of hope that her family's peaceful picnic had sparked a change. She knew that there were many more challenges ahead, but she was determined to use this experience as an opportunity to raise awareness about racial inequality and work towards creating a better world for all. As they packed up their things and prepared to leave the park, Karen felt a sense of purpose in her actions. She had learned from Mrs. Jenkins' honesty and understanding, and now it was time to take action herself. With renewed determination and passion, she walked away from the park, determined to make a difference in her community and beyond. The sun continued to shine down on them as they made their way home, each step carrying with them the lessons learned that day about racial justice and equality for all. The world was not yet perfect, but Karen knew that by working together towards creating change, she could help create a brighter future for everyone involved. A peaceful family's picnic turned into a nightmare when a wealthy racist woman hurled insults, then called 911 with a deadly lie, claiming the family was an armed gang. Karen Jenkins, their youngest daughter and proud member of the Black community, had always lived in harmony with her neighbors. She loved spending time outdoors, engaging in activities that brought them all together, such as picnics and backyard barbecues. However, on this particular day, everything changed when Mrs. Jenkins arrived at their home and announced she was calling 911 to report a group of armed Black men breaking into her house. Karen's heart raced with fear as the news spread through social media and local media outlets. She tried to brush off her initial reaction, reminding herself that it wasn't typical for someone in her position to make such a rash call about their neighbor's home being invaded by an unknown group of armed individuals. But deep down, she knew something was seriously wrong. As Karen and her family prepared themselves for the chaos that might unfold, they couldn't shake off the feeling of hope that their peaceful picnic had sparked a change in the community. They were aware that racial inequality was still prevalent in many parts of the world, but they believed that by raising awareness about these issues and working towards creating positive change, they could make a difference. As they packed up their things for the day's end, Karen couldn't help feeling a sense of purpose in her actions. She knew that there were many more challenges ahead, but she was determined to use this experience as an opportunity to raise awareness about racial inequality and work towards creating a better world for all. With renewed determination and passion, she walked away from the park, determined to make a difference in her community and beyond. As they arrived at Mrs. Jenkins' house, Karen could hear chaos coming from inside. The door was unlocked, and there were armed men holding knives outside with menacing expressions on their faces. Despite the fear, Karen knew that she had no choice but to confront them and demand answers about what was happening in their home. Mrs. Jenkins, Karen said firmly, I am a member of your community who is concerned about racial inequality and the actions taken by the armed men you claim are breaking into your house. The woman looked up at her with a mix of shock and anger, struggling to keep her voice steady as she spoke. What did those men do? They were here when I returned home earlier this morning, Karen continued, her heart pounding in her chest. "I'm sorry for any misunderstanding," Mrs. Jenkins said, tears streaming down her face. "But the truth is that my husband and I had just finished a peaceful picnic with some of our neighbors from different racial backgrounds. We were enjoying each other's company and discussing various topics related to social justice." Karen could see the fear etched on her mother's face as she spoke, but she refused to be intimidated by the situation. "I understand that it can be distressing to hear such accusations, but I assure you that your husband and I have no intention of causing any harm or disruption to anyone's life," Karen said firmly. Mrs. Jenkins looked away from her daughter for a moment before turning back around and speaking again. "We had just finished our picnic when the men arrived. They were here to collect some belongings, but they didn't seem to be following proper protocol." Karen listened intently as Mrs. Jenkins explained more about what happened that morning. She heard stories of people from different racial backgrounds being invited over for a picnic or a barbecue by their neighbors who had no knowledge of the fact that these individuals were not allowed in without permission. "We were simply enjoying ourselves when we saw them," Karen said, her voice shaking slightly with anger and frustration. "We didn't realize they were armed until it was too late." Mrs. Jenkins looked at her daughter with a mix of regret and concern. She knew that the situation was serious enough to warrant immediate action, but she also understood the importance of finding peaceful solutions rather than resorting to violence. "We need to find out what happened," Karen said firmly, determination in her voice. "We can't let these men go unchecked." Mrs. Jenkins nodded in agreement, knowing that this would be a delicate process that required patience and understanding from all parties involved. She led the family back into their home, where they spent hours interviewing everyone who had been present that morning. As they spoke to each other, Karen uncovered more about the situation and the reasons behind it. They learned that there were indeed people in her community who were struggling with racial inequality and discrimination, but some of them didn't always understand or follow proper protocols when invited over for events like picnics. "I've been hearing similar stories from my own neighbors," Karen said, tears streaming down her face as she spoke. "We need to educate ourselves about the history and nuances of different racial groups so that we can work towards a more inclusive and harmonious community." Mrs. Jenkins nodded in agreement again, recognizing the importance of these discussions for creating change. She led the family back into their home, where they sat down at the kitchen table, brainstorming ideas on how to address this issue. "We could start by organizing educational workshops," Karen said, her voice steady and determined. "We can provide information about racial stereotypes, history, and discrimination so that people from different backgrounds understand what they are up against." Mrs. Jenkins nodded in agreement as she looked around the room at the family's faces. She knew that change wouldn't happen overnight, but together they could make a difference. "We also need to advocate for policy changes," Karen said. "We can write letters to local government officials and push for laws that protect marginalized communities from discrimination and violence." Mrs. Jenkins nodded in agreement as she looked at her daughter's determined expression. She knew that the road ahead would be long, but with determination and a willingness to listen, they could create a better world for all. "We need to continue this conversation," Karen said, looking directly into Mrs. Jenkins' eyes. "Together, we can make a difference in our community and beyond." Mrs. Jenkins nodded once more as she stood up from the table, her heart full of hope and determination. She knew that change wouldn't happen overnight, but with their collective efforts and support, they could create a better world for everyone involved. As they walked out of Mrs. Jenkins' house, Karen felt a sense of accomplishment knowing that she had taken action to raise awareness about racial inequality in her community. They would continue this conversation, advocating for policy changes and working towards creating positive change one step at a time. The sun continued to shine down on them as they made their way back home. each step carrying with them the lessons learned that day about racial justice and equality for all. The world was not yet perfect, but Karen knew that by working together towards creating change, she could help create a brighter future for everyone involved. As the sun began to set over the lush green hills, a group of black families gathered for their annual picnic in the local park. The air was filled with laughter and chatter as they enjoyed each other's company under the warm glow of the setting sun. One family, the Jenkins clan, had always been known for their peaceful demeanor, but on this particular day, tensions ran high. Karen, a dedicated community organizer who worked tirelessly to promote racial justice in her neighborhood, was among those attending the picnic with her husband and 3 children. They had come together to enjoy some fresh air and create lasting memories that would serve as inspiration for future generations. As they sat around their table, Karen couldn't help but feel grateful for the opportunity to have this gathering. Suddenly, Mrs. Jenkins interrupted their conversation by calling 911 with a deadly lie. "I'm afraid there's been a shooting in our neighborhood," she said, her voice shaking and filled with fear. The other families looked at each other in shock, unsure of what was happening. Karen quickly took charge, addressing the gathered group as they all stood up. "We need to remain calm and gather together before we call for emergency services," she declared. "We know that calling 911 can trigger panic, but let's not lose sight of our goal, preserving lives and ensuring the safety of everyone involved." The Jenkins clan began to take stock of their surroundings as they surveyed the area around them. They saw no signs of a crime in progress, only an armed man standing by the entrance to one of the picnic sites. Karen quickly pulled out her phone and dialed 911, speaking with dispatchers who confirmed that there was indeed a shooting. "We need everyone to remain vigilant," she continued, emphasizing the importance of staying alert during times like these when it comes to crime prevention in their community. "If you see anything suspicious or report it immediately so we can investigate and ensure our safety." As Karen spoke with dispatchers, her family members began to share their own experiences growing up as a black community in America. They talked about the challenges they faced at school and work, how they overcame them through education and perseverance, and the importance of standing together against discrimination. Karen's words resonated deeply within the group, and she could see that everyone was feeling the weight of the situation. Some were shaken by Mrs. Jenkins' lies, while others remained hopeful as they brainstormed solutions to address the issue at hand. "Let's start by gathering all our neighbors in this park," Karen suggested, her voice firm but empathetic. "We need to work together and establish a safe perimeter around the picnic site until we receive further information about what happened." As the Jenkins clan began to form their plan, Karen continued to speak with dispatchers, updating them on their progress and sharing ideas for how they could best respond to the situation. "We should also keep an eye out for any witnesses or surveillance footage," she added. "This might help us identify the shooter and potentially piece together what happened." The Jenkins clan in agreement, taking note of Mrs. Jenkins' suggestion and setting their alarms on high alert as they waited for more information to arrive. As night fell over the park, Karen and her family members continued to work together, using all the knowledge and resources at their disposal to ensure everyone's safety while maintaining a sense of unity and resolve in the face of adversity. The next morning, Mrs. Jenkins' lies had been exposed as false, but the damage had already been done. The community was divided over what had happened that night, with some holding out hope for change and others struggling against it. Karen knew that their work wasn't just about stopping crime. It was also about creating a more inclusive and equitable society where everyone's voices were heard. As they sat around the picnic site on a sunny morning, Karen took a deep breath and reminded herself of her commitment to promoting racial justice in her community. She looked out at the group of black families gathered there, feeling grateful for their resilience, determination, and willingness to work together towards a brighter future. "We can make change," she said, standing up from the table. "Together, we have the power to shape our world and ensure that every person has access to opportunities regardless of race." The Jenkins clan nodded in agreement, their eyes filled with hope for a better tomorrow. Karen knew that this was just one step towards creating a more equitable society, but she also recognized the importance of continued education and activism in addressing issues of racial inequality. With each passing day, they worked tirelessly to promote positive change within their community, using their voices and experiences as inspiration for others who were struggling against injustice. They remained committed to standing together, fighting for justice, while celebrating diversity and unity, and creating a world where everyone's rights and dignity are valued above all else. Chapter 1. The unbearable truth. The Jenkins family's peaceful picnic at the local park was a moment of tranquility and joy, as they enjoyed each other's company while enjoying the sunshine. Karen, their matriarch, took a deep breath and reminded herself that this day would be an opportunity to share her passion for racial justice with others in her community. She had spent years fighting against racism and inequality, and she knew firsthand how it affected people of all races. As they sat under a tree, sharing stories about the challenges their ancestors faced, Karen felt grateful for the resilience and strength of black communities across America. The Jenkins clan was made up of 6 siblings: Jamal, Maya, Kofi, Michael, Tamika, and Anika, each with unique backgrounds and perspectives that had shaped them into the individuals they are today. When Karen took a turn sharing her story about the arrest of her father for engaging in hate crimes against black people back home, the atmosphere at the picnic turned tense. The Jenkins patriarch, Jamal, was one of the leaders in their community, known for his unwavering commitment to racial justice and his dedication to upholding the law. "Remember when we stood together as a family during those protests?" Jamal said, his voice shaking with emotion. "We were demanding change, not just for us but for all communities. We knew that our voices would be heard if we came together in numbers." Karen nodded, tears streaming down her face. She had been following the Black Lives Matter movement since its inception and had seen firsthand how racism was impacting people's lives every day, from police brutality to systemic inequalities. But when Karen shared about Jamal's arrest and the subsequent charges he faced for his activism, a wave of anger swept over the picnic attendees. Some criticized him for stirring up emotions and taking risks that could potentially harm others, while others accused him of being out of touch with reality due to his lack of experience or understanding of the systemic issues at play. Despite the opposition, Jamal remained steadfast in his commitment to fighting against racism and inequality. He spoke from a place of conviction and pride, emphasizing how he had watched as black people were subjected to discrimination and injustice for generations, and that it was time for change now more than ever. "The truth is this," Jamal said, his voice rising with each word. "The police are not the enemy. They serve us all equally, but we have been mistreated by a system built on biases and prejudices. We need someone who understands this. Someone who will stand up against injustice without fear of retribution." Karen listened intently as Jamal spoke about the systemic issues facing black people in America, including police brutality, housing discrimination, lack of access to education and healthcare, and economic disparities. She knew that it would take more than just individual action to make a difference. But she was inspired by Jamal's determination to use his voice to create positive change. "Change starts with us," Karen said, her words echoing in the park as they continued their conversation. We need to educate ourselves about racism and its impact on our communities and advocate for policies that address these issues head-on. With a growing sense of urgency, Jamal leaned forward, putting his hand over his heart. "I know what it's like to feel isolated and alone," he said, tears streaming down his face. "But I refuse to give up hope. We can't let fear or apathy define our struggle for justice. We must rise above the shadows and create a world where everyone's rights are respected." As Karen stood there watching Jamal speak, she knew that her family was not alone in their fight against racism. They had been standing together all along, fighting for change through education, activism, and community organizing. The Jenkins clan continued to picnic at the park, enjoying each other's company while sharing stories about their own experiences with racism. As they sat under a tree, Karen looked out over the crowd, feeling inspired by Jamal and her fellow activists. She knew that this day would be an opportunity for them to inspire others to join their fight against injustice and work towards creating a more equitable society. Chapter 2. The dark path. As the sun began to set on the park's grassy lawn, Karen was approached by a woman named Rachel, who had been attending the picnic as well. Rachel introduced herself as a local community leader and said that she heard about Jamal and his arrest through social media posts. Rachel shared her own experiences with racism growing up in a predominantly black neighborhood, explaining how it had affected her sense of self-worth and identity. She spoke about the challenges faced by people from different racial backgrounds when accessing basic necessities like education and healthcare, and how these disparities often led to discrimination and injustice. Rachel's words resonated deeply with Karen, who felt grateful for Rachel's willingness to share her own story in order to raise awareness of the ongoing issue facing black communities. She knew that she had a responsibility as an advocate to speak out against racism and promote racial justice, but she also wanted to do so in a way that was impactful and actionable. "Rachel," Karen said, placing a hand on Rachel's shoulder. "We all have stories to share about the challenges we face due to racism. Our own experiences are just one aspect of the larger systemic issue. What if instead of focusing solely on individual actions, we work together as a community?" With that in mind, Karen and Rachel sat down next to Jamal at their picnic table, discussing potential strategies for addressing the issues facing black communities in America. They brainstormed ideas around education initiatives, policy changes, and grassroots organizing, emphasizing the importance of creating safe spaces where people could come together to share experiences and learn from one another. As they talked about these topics, Karen felt a sense of pride knowing that she was part of an organized effort to address the root causes of racism in their community. She knew that it would take time, patience, and persistence to create real change, but she also understood that every individual's voice had the power to make a difference. Over the next few weeks, Karen and Rachel continued to work together as a team, using their collective knowledge and skills to promote racial justice in their community. They organized workshops on diversity and inclusion, hosted rallies at local parks, and collaborated with local organizations to advocate for policy changes that would address issues like police brutality and housing discrimination. Despite the challenges they faced, Karen and Rachel remained committed to their goal of creating a world where everyone's rights are respected and valued above all else. They knew that it was not an easy journey, but they were determined to keep pushing forward, knowing that each small step brought them closer to their vision for a more just and equitable society. Chapter 3. A dark turn. As the sun began to set once again on the park's grassy lawn, Karen found herself reflecting on her experiences during this time. She had faced opposition from some members of her community who believed that racism could not be defeated by individual action or collective efforts alone. But as she looked out over the group of black families gathered there, feeling grateful for their resilience and determination, Karen knew that they were in a race against time to make change happen before it was too late. The Jenkins clan had taken significant steps towards addressing racism in their community, but there remained much work to be done. Karen took a deep breath and reminded herself of the importance of staying true to her values as an advocate for racial justice. She knew that she could not let fear or apathy consume her during this critical moment, especially when it came to issues like police brutality and systemic inequalities. "I can't just sit back and watch as others suffer," Karen said, her voice filled with determination. "I have a responsibility to stand up against injustice and use my platform to make a difference." With that in mind, Karen reached out to local law enforcement agencies and community leaders, sharing her concerns about the systemic issues facing black communities in America and urging them to take action. She shared examples of cases where individuals had been unjustly targeted by police or faced discrimination based on their race, highlighting how these incidents could have serious consequences for both victims and society as a whole. Karen's message resonated deeply with many people who were listening to her speak, including members of the Jenkins clan who supported her efforts. They knew that addressing racism required collective action and collaboration from all segments of society, and THEY shared Karen's passion and commitment to creating positive change in their community. Despite the opposition she faced from some individuals, Karen remained steadfast in her belief that racial justice was a fight for everyone. She knew that it would not be easy, but she also understood that every individual had a role to play in building a better future for all people of color. Over the next few weeks, Karen and Rachel continued their work towards creating change in their community. They organized more workshops on diversity and inclusion, worked tirelessly with local organizations, and collaborated with law enforcement agencies to advocate for policy changes that would address issues like police brutality and systemic inequalities. Despite the challenges they faced, Karen felt a sense of pride knowing that she was part of an organized effort to make a difference in their community. She knew that it was not just about fighting against racism, but also about building strong relationships with other individuals who shared her vision for a more equitable society. As the sun began to, the black family's peaceful picnic turns into chaos when a wealthy racist woman hurls insults, then calls 911 with a deadly lie, claiming the family is an armed gang. In their small suburban neighborhood in South Carolina, Karen and Rachel had planned a simple day for themselves. They were spending time with their families at the local park on Saturday morning as they enjoyed the beautiful weather outside. The peaceful scene was interrupted by the sudden appearance of Karen's neighbor, Sarah, who seemed to be in distress. Sarah's words caught Karen off guard when she accused them of being an armed gang. She claimed that they had been seen arguing and pointing weapons at her house earlier in the day. When Karen asked for more details about their actions, Sarah became increasingly agitated and refused to provide any information. The couple quickly realized that something was not right. As they listened to Sarah's accusations, Rachel tried to remain calm, but couldn't shake off the fear. She felt as if there were hidden dangers lurking around every corner. Karen knew that calling 911 with a false claim could have serious consequences for them and their families, so they decided to gather more information before making any rash decisions. They started by retracing Sarah's steps from her house and found evidence of an argument between the two parties earlier in the day. They discovered that Sarah had been talking to one of Karen's friends, who lived on a nearby street, about the situation with their family at the park. The friend reported that he had seen several people arguing, but did not witness anything out of character. After obtaining this information from multiple sources, Karen and Rachel confronted Sarah directly, demanding answers for her false claims. Despite Sarah's attempts to dismiss them or deny any involvement in the incident, they were persistent in their investigation. After a tense exchange of words, Sarah finally broke down and confessed that she had been upset about a disagreement with one of Karen's family members over park rules and decided to make up an excuse for her actions. She admitted that she had mistaken Karen's husband as part of the gang because he was standing at attention during their argument. With this admission in hand, Karen felt relieved but also hurt by Sarah's betrayal. They knew that false accusations could have serious consequences not only for them and their families, but also for everyone involved in the situation. As they continued to gather evidence and investigate further, Karen realized that she needed to take action before her community was affected any longer. The couple decided to reach out to law enforcement agencies and inform them about Sarah's false claims. They explained how it had impacted not only their own lives, but also the safety of others in the neighborhood. They asked for help from local authorities to gather more evidence and ensure that Sarah faced appropriate consequences for her actions. In a joint press conference, Karen, Rachel, and several other community members shared their concerns about the false claims made against the Black family. The news quickly spread throughout South Carolina, causing shock and outrage among residents who had been caught off guard by Sarah's accusations. As the story unfolded, it became clear that the wealthy, racist Woma was not acting in her own self-interest, but rather for someone else's agenda. She knew how to manipulate others' emotions and silence their voices, making them feel vulnerable and helpless. Karen realized that she needed to take a stand against such individuals who sought to exploit others for their own gain. They formed an alliance with local organizations and community leaders, working together to raise awareness about the false accusations made against the Black family and advocate for policy changes that would address issues like police brutality and systemic inequalities. Karen knew that change was not going to happen overnight, but that it needed to start from within. She began by speaking out on social media platforms, sharing her story with friends and followers who had been affected by Sarah's actions. Her message resonated with a wide audience, inspiring others to join the fight for racial justice in their communities. As Karen continued to speak out against false accusations made against the Black family, she also worked tirelessly with local law enforcement agencies and community leaders to gather more evidence and ensure that Sarah faced appropriate consequences. She advocated for increased police training on implicit bias, policies that prioritize diversity and inclusion, and changes to the justice system that would hold individuals accountable for their actions. The story of Karen and Rachel's journey against false accusations made against a wealthy racist woman in South Carolina served as a powerful reminder about the ongoing fight for racial equality. They showed how even small acts of kindness and collective action can make a significant difference, inspiring others to stand up against injustice and demand change from those who seek to exploit their communities. As they continued to work towards building a more equitable society, Karen knew that there was still much work to be done. But she also felt a sense of pride knowing that her efforts had brought attention to the issue and led to meaningful changes in their community. She knew that it would not be easy, but she also understood that every individual has a role to play in creating positive change for all people of color. As they sat together on the grass at their peaceful picnic spot, reflecting on their journey against false accusations made against the Black family, Karen and Rachel felt grateful for the opportunity to make a difference. They knew that their work was not over yet, but that it had only just begun. The road ahead would be long and challenging, but they were determined to continue fighting for justice and making their community a better place for all people of color. As the sun began to set on their peaceful picnic spot, Karen looked up at Rachel with a smile on her face. "We did it," she said, tears streaming down her face. And we're not done yet. In the small town of Oakville, nestled in a lush green valley with rolling hills and breathtaking views, the Black family had always lived a peaceful life. They owned a small farm that produced fresh fruits and vegetables, and they were known for their dedication to community service and social justice causes. One day, on a warm summer evening, Karen and Rachel decided to host a backyard picnic in their front yard as a way to enjoy the beautiful weather and spend time with their extended family. They had planned it carefully, selecting a location that was peaceful and secluded from any major roads or noise pollution, away from busy streets or nearby landmarks. As they settled into their comfortable chairs under the trees, Karen took a deep breath of fresh air and looked out at the picturesque scenery around them. The sun was setting behind the hills, casting a warm glow over everything in its wake, and the gentle breeze rustled through the leaves, creating a soothing melody that filled the air. The couple sat together for an hour or so, chatting about their lives, sharing stories of their family's ancestors who had come to this country as immigrants seeking better opportunities. As they laughed and joked, Karen couldn't help but feel grateful for the opportunity to connect with her extended family and learn more about their culture and traditions. But just as everything was quiet and peaceful on that warm summer night, a loud commotion broke out in the nearby park. A wealthy racist woman had arrived at the picnic spot, armed with a microphone and cameras, intent on spreading false accusations against the Black family. She claimed to have witnessed them engaging in various illegal activities such as drug trafficking and theft, and she was determined to expose their criminal behavior. Karen and Rachel were shocked and taken aback by her sudden appearance, not knowing what had led her to come to their peaceful picnic spot. The woman's voice boomed over the speakers, shouting at everyone present to evacuate the area immediately. As Karen tried to compose herself, she saw a group of people running towards them, some carrying cameras and others holding signs that read, "Black Lives Matter" or "Justice for All." She realized with a jolt that this was not an ordinary picnic event, but rather a peaceful gathering organized by activists who were fighting against racial injustice. Karen and Rachel quickly gathered their belongings and made her way to the safety of the nearby park, where she met up with other organizers and supporters. They discussed the woman's false accusations and the consequences it would have on the Black family if they were forced to leave the spot under threat. As they stood together in silence, Karen felt a sense of pride knowing that their efforts had brought attention to this issue and led to meaningful changes in their community. She knew that her work was not over yet, but that it had only just begun. The road ahead would be long and challenging, but they were determined to continue fighting for justice and making their community a better place for all people of color. The next day, Karen reached out to the local media outlet, sharing details about the incident with them in an article she wrote on her blog. She spoke about how peaceful the picnic had been until someone brought up false accusations, highlighting the importance of standing up against racism and injustice whenever it occurs. As a result, the woman who made those false accusations was arrested for fraudulently claiming to have witnessed illegal activities during the picnic, and the Black family's reputation in Oakville remained intact. The community rallied around them, supporting their efforts and celebrating their bravery in speaking out against racial discrimination. The incident sparked conversations about race relations in Oakville and beyond, leading to increased awareness of issues such as police brutality, housing segregation, and economic inequality among marginalized communities. Karen felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that her work had not only made a difference for the Black family, but also contributed to creating a more just society. As they sat down together once again on their front yard's grass, Karen looked up at Rachel with a smile on her face. "We did it," she said, tears streaming down her face. "And we're not done yet." They both knew that there was still much work to be done, but for now, They were content knowing that their efforts had brought hope and inspiration to the community. A peaceful picnic on the family's front yard in Oakville turned into chaos when a wealthy racist woman, Rachel, hurls insults and then falsely claims to have witnessed illegal activities during their gathering. The Black family had always been known for their kindness and respect towards all members of the community, but this incident would change that perception forever. As Karen made her way to the picnic area, she noticed two young men playing soccer on a nearby grassy field. She approached them with a smile and asked if they were up for some friendly competition. The boys laughed and eagerly accepted, eager to show off their skills. As they played, Rachel watched from afar, her eyes fixed on them. Rachel's sudden appearance at the picnic table caught everyone's attention as she took out her phone and showed it to Karen. "These kids are a little rough around the edges," she said with a hint of irritation in her voice. "They need some guidance." Karen felt a pang of guilt for not noticing Rachel earlier, but she quickly dismissed it, reminding herself that it was just one person's perspective and everyone had their own unique experiences. Rachel continued to speak about the group of kids, detailing how they were involved in an illegal drug deal hours before Karen arrived. She claimed that they had been hiding a large sum from a local dealer, threatening him with violence if he didn't comply. Rachel's lies had caused chaos within the community and threatened to escalate into further criminal activity. Karen listened intently as Rachel explained her actions, feeling a deep sense of frustration for not being able to intervene earlier. She knew that this incident would forever change their reputation in Oakville, but she also felt an overwhelming sense of pride in what they had done. The police arrived at the picnic area soon after Rachel's false claims were made and began questioning the family members. Karen was nervous about getting caught up in a high-stakes legal battle, feeling like her life would be put on hold for weeks or even months. But as she stood with her husband, Rachel, and their two children, they knew that this was an opportunity to shine. Rachel opened up about her actions, explaining how she had been influenced by the negative stereotypes surrounding race in Oakville and decided to take matters into her own hands. She wanted to confront these injustices head-on and make a positive impact on the community. Karen's words touched the hearts of the police officers who were present at the picnic area that day. They began listening, understanding Rachel's perspective and realizing that there was still work to be done in Oakville to combat racial inequality and address some of the underlying issues facing marginalized communities. The family members sat down together once again on their front yard's grass, surrounded by a sea of faces from different backgrounds but united against a common enemy. Karen looked up at Rachel with tears streaming down her face. "We did it," she said, breaking away from her husband's embrace and taking a deep breath. They both knew that there was still much work to be done, but for now, they were content knowing that their efforts had brought hope and inspiration to the community. They reflected on how far they had come since the incident, grateful for the support of their friends, family, and community members who stood by them through thick and thin. As Rachel stepped back into her car, Karen turned to her husband with a smile on her face. "We did it," she said, "and we're not done yet." The family's peaceful picnic had turned into chaos when a wealthy racist woman, Rachel, called 911 with a deadly lie.